welcome everyone, and thank you, Mary and DeVries and Lynn Palmer, for setting this up. This is our second webinar concerning COVID-19 and the town and the community's response. My name is Kevin Lawler of Edward Jones Investments here in Wolfeboro, and currently serving as the president of the board of the Chamber of Commerce for the Wolfeboro Area Chamber of Commerce. So again, thank you all for joining. It certainly feels a lot different than it did 5 weeks ago when we ran our last webinar, right? Some of the sights and sounds that we love about Wolfeboro have returned. We've watched spring finally emerge, and there's a true feeling of optimism that is palpable in the streets. So I'm very excited to move into the next phase of this experience. But I think this is a timely informational session, panel discussion regarding how to do this in a smart way. And before we start, I do want to acknowledge a word from the Chamber of Commerce that we've been grappling with over the last several weeks, and that is we have remained open. Okay, so Mary DeVries has been taking phone calls, offering input, setting the runway for folks to return back to Wolfeboro who might be seasonal residents and returning from their vacation homes and some in Florida back to their what they consider home, Wolfeboro. And so it's been a really nice service, I can imagine, for folks wanting to get the lay of the land, and also for the chamber to be able to garner information from people who are coming from various hotspots of COVID-19 and with understandable nervousness approaching their experience in Wolfeboro. So it's been great that we have been able to remain open. I will say I'm going to take this opportunity just to let folks know that a lot of the large revenue streams that the Chamber of Commerce relies upon to remain open and serve the community have been disrupted, much like many of your businesses. Unfortunately, that's where we find ourselves today. So we appreciate the any support that can be given. Again, thanks for joining. I would like to introduce the panelists. We have the group from 5 weeks ago. If you didn't join us, they have volunteered their time again this morning to offer their insights. We have Matthew Sullivan, who is the Planning and Development Director of the Town of Wolfeboro. We have Bridget Mitchell of Walker and Varney, PC. We have Jeremy Roberge, the President and CEO of Huggins Hospital. We have Aaron Morrissey of Morrissey's Front Porch and Pub, and we have Cindy Patton of the Black's Paper Store and Gift Shop. So we have a cross section of town officials, hospital representative, and small business owners here in town, and some legal guidance as well. So I would first like to jump in as we started last time with Matthew. I think it makes sense to start there again. What are some examples of how the town is directly working with the business community to offer more flexible solutions as we try to get customers back into stores, back into restaurants, and the like?
Kevin, thanks for the question. Good morning, everyone. And I think in the question you hit the key word, and that is flexibility. We are trying to approach our business community, and I think the reopening of the town more generally, in as flexible and nimble a way as possible. Obviously, the governor's orders, the reopening, those practices are changing on a daily basis. So we're trying to adapt our existing policies and regulations to allow for businesses to spread their wings as quickly as possible. The first example of that, I think, and probably the most noticeable one, just because of the nature of it, has really been our restaurants. We have tried to be very hands-off with the expansion of restaurants, both principally outside at this point, and also by providing public space for our restaurants to allow for enhanced takeout and other offerings as well. Restaurants have really been a key thing that we feel like we could have a hand in so far. When it comes to retail and other business, though, which I think is one of the major economic drivers of the community, one of many, I think we're really trying to rely on them to educate their patrons on best practices, but ensure that, you know, all the other services that we as a public government can provide continue to operate consistently, whether it be our restrooms downtown, whether it be the town docks, really carefully weighing any restrictions that we place on those things to ensure that the public can continue to spend money in our businesses here in the community. I think it's really what our focus has been. We've tried to do some things I think that have gone well, whether that's putting out picnic tables that again allow for takeout, but also just allow for more enhanced sort of spending time in public spaces. I think that's gone fairly well. We've heard some good things from people, and I think that offering that public space is really an attractive thing that we want to look carefully at, even moving forward beyond the COVID crisis. I think that that's something that we want to enhance within our downtown, principally moving forward. We've had to work with some specific businesses. You know, we've heard some concerns about this, but also some very positive feedback. You know, I'm sure everyone's seen Bailey's Bubble. Some of those more high traffic businesses that are a little unique in our downtown, particularly, we've had to work with them directly to come up with some, you know, contingency plans that make the public feel comfortable and the employees feel comfortable as well serving. We're going to continue to evaluate those, I think, on an ongoing basis. Kevin, as you said, we're in a much different place than we were 5-6 weeks ago, and I expect we'll be in a much different place 5 or 6 weeks from now as well. And we're evaluating on, I would say, a daily basis. I can tell you that from Friday to Monday, on any given week, things are changing drastically as we see what happens over the weekends. And certainly this weekend was a good litmus test for us. I would say just generally that we are going to continue to defer to what the governor's guidance is on businesses opening. We are not taking any more restrictive stance as of this point in time. We're sticking to what our business is, and that is public space and public services. We really want to make sure that our businesses can open in a timely manner and begin collecting their revenues that they normally would during the summer season, but in a safe manner. So if there are any ideas that certainly members on this call, chamber members on this call have, please do let me know. I've gotten something from every one of these sessions, and certainly talking to folks in the business community as well. And we've made some policy changes as a result of that. So I think we're doing some good things, but I think we have some change to make going forward as well.
Thank you, Matt. That was great. And a point you made there really resonated with me as it relates to the Chamber of Commerce being open and in business. I know that Mary DeVries has fielded concerns and calls from folks, and so I think you know, about the way a particular business might be adhering to some of the guidelines or not, and I think that we as a business community can use this as an opportunity, right? So it would be an unbelievable way to demonstrate your professionalism and care for your customers to adhere to those guidelines. In my view, that could make a lasting impact on your customer base. So given that, Cindy, tell me about how the Memorial Day went for you. It's typically historically a glimpse of what's to come this summer. And you're in a different spot today than you have been at, but I know that in our last call how optimistic you were about rising to the challenge and providing a safe place to do business. So can you give us a snapshot on how it's going? Unmute if you would, please, Cindy.
I'm sorry. We had the opportunity, like you said, to have a snapshot of what was coming up this summer. People definitely have quarantine fatigue. They were anxious to be out and about. 6-foot social distancing was a little tough for some people. For the first time in history, we had to limit the number of people that were in the store, which was one of the recommendations from the Governor's Council. But everything we did, we tried to do with as much humor as we could. People do not read signs. They've had sign fatigue as well. And so what we've asked our staff to do is to continue to have a conversation with people while they're in the store. They haven't talked to anybody else very much in the last 2 months. They appreciated the conversation and the interaction. They are craving human interaction. So it was a good opportunity to kind of make your point in a way that resonated with the customer, like you were saying, Matt. You know, we said, for instance, we have an in and out door. And so we said, you know, they're like belly buttons. We have an innie and we have an outie. And we just need you guys to kind of help us out with that. The state said we couldn't train people to be able to be in this type of retail. And we told the state we could, so we need your help. Those were the kinds of things that resonated with the people that we particularly have for customers. They had children, so that humor kind of translated no matter what the age of the person was. We made the decision to open internally for a week before so we could practice our social distancing, wearing masks, finding masks that were comfortable for the staff to wear while they were working, which was a big concern. And our philosophy has been is that if we are practicing all the things that have been asked from us from the state, it's easy for the customers to practice as well. What I will tell you that we got for feedback as far as adhering to the guidelines from the state was, you forget they've come from situations where they may be in a place where masks are required no matter what store you're in. So there was a lot of that type of behavior, which was coming from a hot spot that they were anticipating that they were going to see when they came here. So while it's recommended that people wear masks, we definitely got asked from customers, should I have a mask on? And that prompted the conversation of, our staff is doing it. We would be more than appreciative if you did it. And a lot of them would just reach into their bag or their purse or whatever and put their mask on to be in the store. What I didn't see, which I know is really tough as far as parenting, is trying to get children to wear masks. And we definitely have a lot of smaller people that, you know, we feel responsible for in the store. And we did take some of the leniency that the state said that we could have as an individual store owner, and we kind of limited our traffic flow through the store in a sense that we didn't want children who were in the store without a parent. I mean, people have a tendency to think that Wolfeboro is a super safe place, and you often see kids on bikes without an adult. So definitely, you know, we had to have a conversation with some parents and say, in this instance, you may want to just kind of keep a tighter rein on your kids so that you know where they are and what's going on.
Yeah, thank you, Cindy. A challenge, I'm sure, to manage the spectrum of expectations and on your part. And as we progress through this and we move towards a containment plan, I guess my next question is for Jeremy. I'm sure understanding the risk is a big factor here. So can you tell me where Huggins is with testing now?
Yeah, sure. The last time we spoke, there were quite a few restrictions on testing, and the symptoms weren't as widespread or as big of a list as we have right now. But since then, Huggins and all hospitals have plenty of supplies, at least as of today. That can change quickly sometimes, but we all are in pretty good shape with the supplies needed. And the CDC and the state have added quite a few symptoms to the list, almost making it that basically if you feel ill at all, you should be either calling the Huggins hotline to verify if you should come in to be tested, or calling your doctor. And most likely you're going to be tested. The list of symptoms at this point, the most common one is still fever. Most people that have COVID do have a fever. But it's not uncommon to have very mild symptoms and have maybe only one or two of the other symptoms, which include everything from a cough, shortness of breath, fatigue, muscle body aches, headaches, loss of taste and smell are relatively new ones that were added, sore throat, congestion, runny nose, nausea, vomiting, diarrhea. I mean, pretty much anything you have that you don't feel well, you should be questioning whether or not you should be tested. And I think that is a big part of the containment process also. I think the more people we can get tested, to see who have it and how we can contain it that way will be a big help going forward. So again, we have our hotline number you can call. I gave it out last time. I'll give it again this time. It's 603-569-7558. Which again, you can call that number and we'll screen you and determine if you should be tested. There's also other state facilities that have opened up in Tamworth and Rochester, I think are the two closest ones to Wolfeboro. And then you could also just call your doctor. If you don't typically come to Huggins, call your doctor and they'll figure out if you should be tested at that point.
Great, thank you, Jeremy. A complicated problem, I know. Now, as it relates to that, so we're having, a big pollen season right now, so virtually everyone has a runny nose. But as we consider, business owners are challenged with understanding the medical risk and following guidelines, and also trying to run a viable, profitable business with employees. So that brings my next question to Bridget. Given all these factors, how can businesses that deal with the public best limit the liability exposure to the reopening?
Hi, thanks for the question. Good morning. Liability is a major concern within the business community. There's no question that more and more COVID-related lawsuits are going to be filed against businesses. In fact, they're already popping up all over the country. There is some legislation in the works on the federal and state level for business protection and immunity against liability claims. In New Hampshire specifically, you may have heard this referred to as a safe harbor legislation. Just keep in mind that's kind of a misnomer because it won't offer businesses absolute immunity from lawsuits, but it will help vet out the frivolous claims at the threshold and will probably help deter your frequent flyer sue-happy litigants. So that's a good thing, but there's nothing that I'm aware of in place yet. Also it goes without saying there's no one-size-fits-all solution to this. So we're dealing with not only a very complicated and comprehensive set of laws and policies, but also uncharted territory that's constantly evolving. So we're gonna
Thank you, Bridget.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Martin, go ahead, finish up. I apologize.
No, that's okay. Sorry. Speaking of allergies, I was just going to cough, so I have pretty bad allergies right now to the tree pollen. But we're going to have to wait and see how the dynamics of all of this play out. Some of the potential claims that you want to be aware of are obviously your negligence-based claims, generally asserted when there's a breach of a duty of reasonable care owed to your business invitees, such as reasonable protections from foreseeable harm. And this includes negligent or otherwise wrongful conduct of your employees and could even stretch into liability for third-party actions. You also want to be aware of misrepresentation and consumer protection claims. So this would be when a business makes misleading, even negligently and not intentionally, but misleading or inaccurate statements available to the public. For example, the steps they're taking to reduce the risk or mitigating the risk of spreading and contracting the virus. And one other thing to be aware of along those same lines is that New Hampshire law generally prohibits exculpatory contracts to indemnify a person against their own negligence and other similar liability waivers. So just keep that in mind. So just a couple more things, essential things you should be doing to minimize your exposure with the public is, first, you should know the scope of your insurance coverage. It's a good time to review your policies. Make sure there's no virus exclusion or similar limitation language. It's also a good time to make sure your corporate documents are legally sufficient, up to date, as well as reviewing any indemnification obligations you may have with vendors or that are to third parties provided for in contracts. Many people are surprised to learn that they can be personally sued along with the business, even though they're incorporated or as an LLC or formed, say, under an S corp. Most people think that that's just supposed to limit their personal liability, and it is, but in order to prevent the piercing of the corporate veil, as it's commonly referred to, you don't want to be commingling your personal and business assets and expenses. So one, essential thing you should be doing is, if you're not doing it already, start keeping organized and accurate records and accounting, keep separate bank accounts, keep, your personal truck should not be in the business name, stuff like that. And lastly, and importantly, as much as reasonably possible, follow your local, state, and federal guidance, even if it's merely recommendations. You also want to show the public that you're following it by hanging signs, promoting social distancing, promoting wearing masks, things like that. Particularly the guidance from OSHA and the CDC, because failure to do so will be the first thing that's looked at and attacked if you are sued. So, and I think that's about all I have for that, unless there's any questions.
Thank you, Bridget, for that. It's a lot to digest, and your expertise is valued here. So then there's that, right? So Aaron, trying to run a restaurant, pivoting there. So trying to keep employees. I know that in our last call, in prior conversations, keeping your staff, educating them, getting them up to speed, and then incenting customers to order takeout. Can you give and now moving to the outdoor seating, can you give us a sense of how that's going?
Sure. It's going pretty good. We've instituted a couple other policies in the business or physical attributes. We put a couple of big tables in front of the takeout window, so people were kind of like putting their head right in the window when they were ordering or picking up. So we put a couple of big tables out there. They can't get within 6 feet of my staff now, which is nice. No one is still coming in the building, obviously, and we're not opening up the bathrooms. So that is really, we've got a really nice, unique situation where we're doing a nice takeout business, and we really don't have to intermingle with the customer directly. A lot of it's phone order, a lot of it's credit card in advance. We did not participate in the full service outside as other restaurants have done, or takeout, and people can sit at the picnic tables on their own, just the way we've always done. Has worked out great. I didn't need to add any of that. I do have a very worrisome staff, which is great because they're super strict on their policies. They don't want to get sick. They don't want to bring it home. They don't want to intermingle with the customers. So it's really, it's been a good situation. We're going out to the picnic tables and, cleaning them, every time someone gets up, that whole 9 yards, even though we're not servicing them, we're making sure outside stays nice and clean. And it's been pretty good. I'm very hopeful to get people in the building at some point. But right now it is working.
Great. That's great to hear, Aaron. And I know you've been creative and flexible with serving customers, and our restaurants are part of what draws people to our community, and it's part of the experience. So I appreciate all you're doing in this challenging time to keep those businesses alive. I suppose now we should move to a question for Matt. Since our last web conference, how have the town's plans for the summer season changed from major events like the 4th of July parade, opening beaches to the public, public spaces? Where do we stand on that today?
Well, substantially, I think is the short answer for how they've changed. But there's, different opinions and different decisions have been made on the different issues. I think I can say collectively, though, that none of the decisions that have been made by the town have been easy. I think that's sort of a company line in some ways, but as part of many of the task forces that have made the decisions on these have been really tough. The first that I hope everyone is aware of, and if you're not, I'll make you aware now. Ultimately, the decision was made by the Legion Post in concert with the Board of Selectmen not to hold the July 4th parade this year. We are aware of some other efforts out in the community to try and sort of reinvigorate that, but right now the decision is not to have those festivities. We are working with the chamber actively, and thanks to Mary for her efforts on that, as well as the others on the task forces, to come up with some other plans, some sort of July 4th alternatives that allow residents and businesses to celebrate our independence in a more creative way, hopefully. So hopefully we'll have some more information on that soon. The Board of Selectmen actually appointed 6 task forces focusing on different, really different focus areas, ranging from events like the Granite Man Triathlon to the July 4th Parade to social distancing more generally to our parks and recreation programs, which I know are so critical for many of the young families in the community and adjacent communities. Those 6 task forces actually made recommendations to the Board of Selectmen. Some will continue to make recommendations based on changing circumstances. And that's really where that July 4th decision came from. But they have decided to actually cancel all parks and recreation programs for the summer, which was in some ways, I think, maybe the most challenging decision. Again, as important as July 4th is, it's a one-time event. It's an amenity in some ways, whereas our park and recreation programs are really an important tool for a lot of families to keep their children occupied and keep the family getting outdoors and staying healthy. So that was a really, really tough decision to be made. As many of you know, there are a multitude of other temporary events that happen in the community throughout the year, whether it be the boat regatta or the smaller sailboat races along Back Bay. We're making decisions on those on a case-by-case basis at the select board level. Those are going to be evaluated really as public health circumstances change, and really based on how the event can be held in a safe and socially distanced manner. I think that's a critical piece, and that's really why the July 4th decision was made the way that it was. I will say that one event that I know is important to a lot of people is that Granite Man Triathlon. Decision has not been made on that yet. That'll hopefully be made by June 17th of this year, but that's really a big one for the community as well. I would just say that beaches are something that we're making some progress on. I can't release any formal news just yet, but my understanding is the beaches are undergoing a reopening process right now. So hopefully some public news on that shortly. We know it's a huge amenity for the community and certainly a draw for the community. And I'm certainly happy to talk about our seasonal residents and our visitors a little more in further details as we move through the talk. But our goal is to get the community as open as possible and safely as possible as we can. It's been unfortunate the decisions that we've had to make on some of these events, but we feel they're the right ones.
Thank you, Matt. I know very challenging work ahead. And some of the items that you brought up made me think about Huggins Hospital, major employer, and services that that we need to have open. So, Jeremy, question to you: what services are open over the last month? You know, we were starting to consider opening various services, and just give us a breakdown of what services are back up and running, how it's going, and maybe a glimpse of the finances of the hospital itself. Sure,
thanks. I'll start by saying, many of our services never closed or diminished during COVID-19. We're still doing primary care services. We still had a full inpatient service. We still had our emergency department. There were some smaller things like our adult day program that we stopped for a while. That's still closed. Probably the biggest change since the last time we spoke is our surgical services. Last week, we started doing surgeries again. We were really only doing urgent and emergent services through April, and only did about, I think it was 17 total cases in April. And I think we did maybe that much, maybe more last week. So we're getting that back up to speed pretty quickly now. It went really well. Of course, it's different than what it used to be. There's a bit more of a process. We're trying our hardest to keep people safe. And one of the biggest things we're doing with surgeries is everyone's getting tested. So before you have a surgery here, like 3 days before the surgery, we'll test you for COVID. We'll ask that you quarantine for the next 3 days. And then if you show any signs or symptoms, we won't do the surgery. If your test comes back positive, we may have to make changes or other plans. But if it comes back negative and you're not showing any signs or symptoms, we'll move forward with doing the surgery. And like I said, we started that last week and it seemed like it went really well. So we're really hopeful that that'll help us quite a bit going forward. And it's great for the community. It's also really important for us from a financial perspective. So to answer your second part of that question, our finances, one of the things that hurt our finances the most was not doing surgeries. We had close to a $3 million loss in April. We had about $1 million operating loss in March when things got started. We're projecting a pretty significant loss still in May. And we're really not sure what to expect this summer. I think we're kind of hopeful that we'll have the volumes we usually have in the summer. I think Memorial Day was a pretty good test of what the volumes might be like, and hearing from others that it was, seemed like a pretty typical Memorial Day. Maybe volumes were a little lower than in the past, but people were out. It felt like a pretty typical Memorial Day. So we'll be curious to see what that does to our volumes in the next 2 weeks too. I know people are probably concerned with how many people are out, so we'll be watching the COVID numbers really closely in the next 2 weeks to see how that affected it. But it was also hopeful to see that, possibly we'll have a pretty typical summer, which is very important to Huggins. That's really the only time of the year that we normally make money, is when people are here on vacation or the part-time residents are here over the summer. So right now, we're projecting a pretty significant loss for this fiscal year, which for us ends in September. We're concerned that next fiscal year could also be a loss for us, but we're very thankful right now that the federal government's been very supportive of hospitals, particularly smaller rural hospitals. So we've gotten quite a bit in advances and grant funding from the federal government. So as of today, from a balance sheet perspective, we're in very good shape, which is great. That allows us to kind of do the things we want to do and run the business the way we want to run it, offer the services we want to offer to the community. So the concern is going forward, will the volumes come back to what they were? Will there be another wave of COVID in the winter? All those things could have a pretty negative effect on our finances going forward.
Right. Thank you, Jeremy. And we certainly value having Huggins here and the professionalism that it provides. Bridget, thinking of Huggins and the risk and employees and all that they face and the small business employees heading back to work, can you enlighten us on some of the common workplace challenges businesses are facing and what steps can be taken to mitigate those with employees?
Yes, well, this pandemic has, forced employers to rapidly develop and implement policies and procedures addressing workplace conditions, employee issues, as well as a host of other challenges. So it's not surprising we're already starting to see COVID-related lawsuits being filed against employers as well, which is just going to grow as time goes on, unfortunately. Mostly seen in the form of tort-related claims and violations in the workplace, such as OSHA violations or the FMLA violations, things of that nature. So at a minimum, you want to be aware of what those guidelines are, specifically OSHA guidelines. On their website, there's a 35-page PDF that's an interim guidance for reopening that you should definitely be reading. You should be following the CDC recommendations and updates. Know your state and federal executive orders and updates with that. Labor laws, particularly employee paid leave rights. And of course, you want to be aware and keep on top of any increases in community transmission and be prepared to immediately adjust your business services and modify your workplace as appropriate, if, such as if mitigation levels increase in this area. But specifically in reference to workplace safety and OSHA in particular, things that you can do, just, some basic things that you could start doing immediately would be to check temperatures and promote mask wearing. Obviously, you don't want to be violating any anti-discrimination laws, but promoting remote working if possible, encouraging sick leave if employees are showing any symptoms, making PPE available to staff, increasing and intensifying your cleaning and disinfecting protocols, implementing additional ventilation if possible, just, opening windows, for example, creating barriers, such as like a sneeze guard, things like that. You also want to consider offering, your workers at a higher risk duties that are going to minimize their contact with the public, things of that nature. Thank you.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Again, a lot to consider, and we're all learning as we go. Cindy, you've been on the front lines here trying to manage your clients, customers. The supply chain was an issue the last month, and you seem to always be looking towards the horizon. So one of the things that I want to ask you is, now that you've adapted your business for curbside and are continuing to modify your in-store experience, what are you learning that's going to help in the event that the possible resurgence of the virus in the fall?
The biggest thing is that we can do it, right? Because we've done it once before. But I would say that there are some things that we've done permanently that we may make less permanent. There are, it is particularly in what Bridget was saying, those are some things that may actually have to be part of our employee manual. We don't have, or we have never had, in a sense, a public health threat that we've had to work in. And so maybe those are things that we are going to reevaluate and add to that employee manual. So that people who do start employment with us know that, these are the best practices that we've had, and that we may have to have these practices again, or we may have to change them given whatever the public health threat is at the time. Also, I think that we're going to continue to try to promote the Facebook selling curbside. It's not only the businesses that are having difficulty unwinding all the restrictions that we had 4 weeks ago, it's the customers that are having a hard time unwinding that as well. I mean, they've been in a situation or an environment where people have said, no, 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 and now it's yes, and there's a little bit of a sense of distrust as to whether that's a real yes or it's a maybe yes. And so I think that it's important to continue to get feedback from some of our residents who have been in hot spots, or our seasonal residents, and see, where they were at and what things they saw that made their experience safe, made them feel safe.
Right. Thank you. I think that's a theme, right? It seems like through the discussion here is knowing our customers and what their concerns are, and safety being, it seems like, the overarching primary one. And so thank you for your insight there. And pivoting now again to restaurants, Aaron, and then from, as you mentioned earlier, you'd like to open up the restaurant and hopefully have folks in the booths, and that's going to require staff. And so how are you managing that? With the relief that's been offered from the federal government, are you able to get the talent that you need, or that you foresee you'll need, with increased staff?
Yeah, we've got an influx of applications in the last couple of weeks, college kids. You've got to believe that a lot of the employment out there is looking for jobs because not a lot of people are still hiring. So I think we're going to see a great influx of applications and qualified applicants, which is nice. That being said, I'm very reluctant to bring new people in and train right now, just so I don't, mush up the water, so to speak. We've got our core crew going right now that have worked together since March 16th, and we haven't introduced anyone new really, and I'd just like to keep it that way. And then, obviously looking forward, if we can open up inside, I am going to need some new staff, or I have other staff that haven't even brought in that have worked for me in the past. So I'll introduce them first, probably one at a time, and make sure things are good. And but the answer to your question is my core staff handles quite a bit. If I add a couple servers, a couple bussers, we can probably do 50% occupancy right away. What's really going to be interesting is if the takeout continues the way it does and we occupy 50% inside. That's going to be a great challenge. That's the hope.
Right, a good problem to have, right? So you're coming out the other side of this. Wow, what an opportunity to have a ripping takeout business with the in building dining experience. So that's potentially the silver lining here to this experience for innovative businesses like yours. And Aaron's talking about his customers using takeout, and a lot of those are year-round residents, but I'm sure increasingly they're seasonal residents. And question to you, Matthew, as we receive this influx of Wolfeboro guests and seasonal residents, what's the town's comprehensive strategy for that incremental influx of population?
I think the strategy doesn't change in a lot of ways from what we're doing with our year-round population. I mean, I think now more than ever, there's a perception that those that come from outside of the community are different than those that are here already. I think to some extent that is true based on level of exposure, but I think that our message is consistent across the board. We want folks to continue to come here, whether they're year-round residents that obviously live here, whether they're seasonal residents, whether they rent a place weekly on an annual basis, or whether they're coming for just a weekend trip. We certainly have not, to use the cliche, we haven't pulled up the drawbridge and closed at the moat. We're open for business. I think what I think we need to do though is educate people on how to be courteous and conscientious of the concerns of others. Even as I sit here in town hall, I know that every person here has a different, feeling about what their level of risk is and different level of concern about the virus, and where even others are coming and going on the weekends. I think we need to have, I think we all need to be conscientious of how others feel, whether we're in the downtown or we're in our workplaces. I think that's the number one goal. I know that one thing that I got out of this call actually last time is that we needed to change our entrance signage coming into town. I think, Cindy, that was something that came from you actually. And we've done that, and we've got a lot of positive response to that. I think rather than being sort of heavy-handed with our our message, we want to be welcoming and also advisory and educational. I think that's really the objective. You will see, and I know signage is getting a little bit tired at this point, but you are going to see some signage going out downtown about social distancing. And it is not intended to be punitive. It's intended to be educational. We want folks to just respect other space, and hopefully everyone can coexist in a safe manner. So I guess to answer the question in finality, we're treating seasonal residents and our regular residents, our year-round residents, the same way. Whether you're renting Airbnb, or which I think will happen soon legally, or you're here year-round, I don't think there's really a difference in the way that we can conduct ourselves as a community.
Right, thank you. I think that tapping into that sense of the Wolfeboro experience and educating folks is the key there.
And Kevin, if I could just add one quick thing. So we've gotten a lot of comments about shutting down in some way the community, and we as sort of the town government, that's just not a reality. It's not a realistic option. So I think it's better for us to plan for the inevitable, which is Wolfeboro being the oldest summer resort. We're going to continue to be that. We're going to continue to be a destination. So let's be as prepared for that as possible, and let's not fool ourselves thinking that we can somehow close at the border. It's just not going to happen.
Right. I appreciate that sentiment. I think there's a wide spectrum. There's no question about it, and there are flashpoints along the way. So I think what we as a chamber are focused on is what do our patrons, what are the businesses need to do to create an environment where people are motivated to use the services that we offer and feel safe doing so. So then that should drive business and loyalty down the line. But to that extent, we want to make all of our permanent residents feel safe, and our year-round workplace workers and the people who test folks for COVID-19 at the hospital and prepare their takeout meals and run their retail stores. So Jeremy, question to you, as one of the largest employers in town, can you give us a sense of how the working year-round residents, the Huggins Hospital employees are doing?
Yeah, thanks. That's a great question. I'll start by saying it's great for me to see how well they're doing and how supportive they're being of each other and all the effort they're putting in to manage something as difficult as this is. But I'll also say, it's wearing on them. It's a tough job. It always was a tough job being a nurse or a doctor. Registering people in a hospital, many of the jobs in a hospital are pretty tough, but I think it's gotten worse over the last couple of months. But I'm really thankful for the great employees we have and all the work that they've been doing over the last few months in particular, and how strong they're remaining through all of this. So it'll be tough. I think it's not going away anytime soon. So I'm always, my focus is trying to keep them motivated and walking around the hospital and checking in on them, make sure everyone's doing okay. I feel like that's the least I can do for them at this point. But they're doing great, and we're trying to do everything we can to protect them. When this all started, we came up with a list of goals. The top one was protecting our employees. We knew that was important, not in a selfish way for the hospital, but if our employees get sick and the hospital can't run, it's no good for the community either. So, and we've stuck by that this entire time. We continue to, everyone's required to wear a mask in the hospital. You can't get into the hospital without being screened at one of our entrances. We've got great people right now doing the screenings. I don't know how they repeat that as many times as they do every day, going through the list of all the questions, but they do it. They're checking temperatures of everyone coming in. So we're doing everything we can to try to protect our employees and protect the community when they come to the hospital. And we feel very confident that, we're doing the right things to keep people safe and keep them coming to the hospital for the services that they need.
Great, thank you. I mean, we all are very appreciative of the staff working on the literally the front lines of this war against COVID-19. So we thank you, Huggins Hospital staff, and all the individuals involved. I'm reading through some of the Zoom group chat questions. One is possibly to Matt. Does the town have a central website for that we can get out and push out to seasonal residents in terms of the information about beaches, about our guidelines, about how we expect them to behave when they're coming to Wolfeboro?
Thanks, Kevin, and thank you, Tina, for the question. Good question. We're actually working on this right now as we speak. We just have a draft of the site going around as of yesterday. Something we wish we had gotten out a little earlier, but we are working on it right now. We are going to stay away from, and I actually thank you, Monica, for your answer. We're going to stay away from the information related specifically to businesses and specifically to the healthcare industry. But we are going to publish something about how the town services and facilities have changed in availability and being open. And hopefully that will be up before the end of this week. So good question. Wish we had gotten that out a little sooner, but we're working on it right now.
Great, thank you. I'm just scrolling through here as I haven't really been checking on the questions there, and what happened last time, I assume, is happening again, where you're answering each other's questions in real time on the chat on Zoom. So I think those questions have been answered. Is there any other input from the panelists that they want to share? Any points that I neglected to get out that you may want to make at this time?
I'll add something. This is Bridget. I'm in the process of compiling a comprehensive information resource for businesses. I'm going to send that to Mary, and board members can add to it if they'd like, and then we can send it out to members. This is a resource for direct links all in one place to financial assistance, executive orders, labor laws I was talking about, OSHA, stuff like that.
That's fantastic. Great. Thank you very much for compiling that, and we'll get it out through the chamber communications. So really appreciate that. Cindy?
Yeah, there's also, I would like to point out that the governor's issued the Main Street Fund. There's a pre-application process. I think Mary's been sending information to people through the chamber as well. Definitely WEDCO is also a good connection for that as well. It's an easy application to fill out to do the pre-qualification. I would encourage people to, definitely go through the process for those funds as well. It's certainly a push for smaller rural businesses in this state that are critical to small towns in New Hampshire.
Thank you, Cindy.
And I just wanted to add one last thing, and it's just a thank you. The community has been so supportive of the hospital. So many people have offered up masks to us, face shields, food. We've had different groups bringing in food for our employees, or restaurants offering discounts. It's been really great to see, and I just wanted everyone to know how much we appreciate that. It's great to see that kind of support. So thank you so much. And I know our employees appreciate it too. So thank you.
Thank you, Jeremy. I know that the community appreciates all that you do, and your staff, and what a resource we have in Huggins Hospital. Any other questions? So I'm reading the chat room about masks. I guess one of the things I think it's probably incumbent upon us all to demonstrate and use signage to communicate our use of masks. It seems like that is the current flashpoint, and as it relates to the chamber, not about anything political, simply a way to drive business. And so I think that I think it's probably incumbent upon us all to take those guidelines seriously. I hope I'm not answering for anyone. I'm reading the questions here. If anyone has anything to add about that, there's questions about what do we do? What do we do about visitors not wearing masks or patrons not complying?
I think the answer is that you kind of lead by doing, right? I mean, I think that we need to, I think Cindy touched on this early too. I mean, having your employees wear masks in the store, you know, and educating the customers as well, I think goes a really long way. We're not going to have the police arrest people who are not wearing masks. That's not a reality. And I know there was a comment earlier about what Nashua has done with its mandatory requirements for face coverings. I don't think that we're dealing with the same level of risk that Nashua is as a border community to Massachusetts just yet. And we don't know that we will. So we're not proposing any measures like that, but I think it's really important for us all as community leaders to sort of demonstrate the right practices and educate those that we see that maybe aren't doing the safest thing. But we're not gonna be arresting people who aren't wearing masks anytime soon.
I agree with Matt's comments, and I'm not sure if they mean by visitors, like people actually just visiting the town or part-time residents, but I guess I just want to take a second to point out that it's not just visitors. I mean, people are on all spectrums of concern about COVID. Some don't believe the masks work. There's plenty of local people who aren't wearing masks. So it's just one of those things that I think the approach of, like Matt said, lead by example, wear a mask, encourage people to wear a mask. But I don't think we need to do what Nash was doing for the reason Matt said. But again, it's just one of those things. Let's all try to do our best. I think there'll be people that aren't going to follow the rules. And I think thankfully there's enough of us who are doing the right thing. And it's worked. Hospitalization numbers have leveled out around 100 in the entire state. The total active cases right now are going down. We don't have very many active cases at all around us. So the people that are following the rules, there's enough people doing it, and it is working.
Great. That's really great to hear, and I think a really good message. And again, I want to thank everyone for joining. Cindy, go ahead.
I would say that half of the problem is they're getting ice cream or a coffee or a drink, and they can't manage the mask and the beverage or the thing that they're walking around town with. I'm not trying to belittle the fact that they're not wearing masks, but you can see them kind of trying to juggle all of that and a cell phone, and it's not pretty. It's just not pretty.
Right. And I think that's just the reality. And I think my sense is that if folks are trying to do the right thing, mostly, that's going to go a long way towards making everybody safe. So again, thank you all for joining today. Thank you, Mary Dries, Lynn Palmer, for organizing this. And thank you especially to our panelists who donated their time and expertise today, and we'll get through this together, and we'll come out of it stronger. I truly believe that. So thank you. And I think that Mary the plan is for her to post this so folks can view it on the chamber website. I send it out to folks, and thank you again. Everyone have a great day.